All right. Today we have a new addition to my, I guess, recording area, which is this fan. I got a new fan. Where I live is quite hot, so we're gonna need this, especially with the summer months coming along. But anyway, welcome back to the Thought Bubble series. I think we're on episode 7 now, which is kind of nice. I've been pretty consistent with these, so hopefully I can continue. But today I kind of wanted to talk about um, something that I mean I always talk about things that have been on my mind recently, but especially with the last couple of weeks being kind of tough for me, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is that a lot of times I think when we get stuck in hard situations, I think we make things worse for ourselves, or like our view on the world I think is a lot more negative than it actually is. Like our reality that we perceive is a lot more negative than I think actual reality is. And so like I was kind of thinking about it because as you guys probably have known, I've had a couple of weeks where work's been kind of stressful, and when you get a lot of workload or stuff like that, or like things frustrate you, it kind of just adds up, and I think that's what ended up happening. But it was like I kind of just noticed like all of these things that were kind of going wrong, whether it's like, um like small conversations with like my manager or something like that, right? Where like I come out of it feeling frustrated, and I'm sure like I'm not like communicating things the right way, or I'm still learning. Of course, I haven't even been there for a year, so we're still working on getting better, of course, every day. But I think the big thing was that like I feel like a lot of times like when he gives criticisms or kind of just feedback, I kind of like internalize it really badly, and I feel like I make it worse for myself, that like a lot of it is like more negative for me than positive, rather than like focusing on the kind of, I guess, like kind of the constructive parts, right? Where it's like, let's say I messed up on a drawing or something like that, and like he leaves comments or whatever. Like it's like, for me, when I read it, sometimes I'm like, dang, how did I miss this? Or like, this seems like such a small thing, why is it like such a big like issue, et cetera, et cetera. And so like a lot of times I feel like I'm making things a lot more negative or a lot more stressful than they need to be. And then it's kind of some of the other things too about just everything in general of even in like sports. I think like sometimes when I go bowling, I've had a couple of bowling practices recently, and then it's just kind of when the ball doesn't roll the right way, or I'm missing my shots or whatever, and I feel like I'm a lot worse than I already am. And this has kind of like been like a recurring thing, as like I don't want to keep going because I feel like there's examples of all of these, and I feel like a lot of times it's kind of a result of me overthinking a lot of things, where I kind of will take a situation or something and just kind of like replay it over in my head, or like basically just like overthink the hell out of it. And then so I come to conclusions that are really contrived, or most of the time like negative in that sense. I don't know if that's like the right way to say it, but a lot of times I find myself like putting myself down. I don't know if I'm like a I probably am a self-deprecator to an extent. I think a lot of times I think there are a lot of like self-imposed ideas for me. A lot of it is just like I feel like I need to live up to an expectation. And so I think that's why a lot of times when work's not going well, right, where I'm not progressing as fast as I want to, a lot of times it's frustrating for me. And it feels like, every time I make a mistake, or I'm like behind on a project a little bit, even though I haven't really been behind on projects and I've been able to turn everything on time, it's kind of like it just feels like really, really bad, because I feel like comparatively to other people, like I'm behind, or I'm not good enough to work on specific things. And so a lot of times I think my perception of both myself and what I do is a lot more negative. And so I've been kind of trying to find a reason why that is. I mean, I think part of it is the self-deprecating thing, but I think also it's like a lot of times maybe there is an actual expectation. I don't know if that's actually the case, but you know, um a lot of them I think are just like self-imposed, and it's a lot of just me like overthinking things. But a lot of times I've been finding myself trying, like, basically making everything into like a negative, and I feel like for those of you out there who have done engineering, you kind of maybe have been in the same boat where if you have like projects in school or college and then you kind of just look around and it's like, a lot of engineering people are really really smart, and so you're kind of working with like the top of intelligence people. So what they do is like super super impressive, but then you kind of like look at yourself and you're like, dang, this sucks, or like I'm not reaching up to my potential, or I'm not like scoring well, or whatever whatever, and then you kind of like end up in a cycle of just kind of putting yourself down, which is kind of rough. I think in that sense I need to try and work on being a bit more like lenient or nice, because as I mentioned, I just started, and you know a lot of the stuff that I'm working on is not things that I learned in college, so it's kind of not necessarily learning from scratch, but it is quite difficult to just kind of like take all the stuff I learned in college and then like throw it out the window mostly, and then basically just learn it all again. And so I think being less self deprecating kind of makes my like view of the world a little bit better. I think another thing I need to work on too, in terms of seeing my situation in a better light, is not necessarily like comparing or thinking too far ahead into the future. Sorry, there's like a bus going by, but like, um, basically, I think I'm too rooted in things that I did in the past where I've had struggles, or like the next time I'll do it, or like if only I did this in the past. And then I also kind of overthink to the extent of things in the future. So, for example, I guess like when I have like deadlines coming up, or like um projects that I need to work on, or like basically when I look too far in the future and try to like predict things and like stress myself out over like too many what ifs rather than staying in the present. I think being present in the present moment is a super super powerful skill. I've been reading a couple books. I can try and link those in the description area if you want to take a look. I don't remember the titles off the top of my head, but both books kind of have the same idea of basically just staying present in the present moment and keeping your focus like in the here and now, because it's like in the past you can't change the past, right? And in the future, it's too unpredictable to know really what's going to happen next. And so there's a lot of like good that happens when you're kind of just focused on what you can do in the here and now. And that means not necessarily that you can't have like aspirations, right, for the future. But I think what the books do a really good job of is framing it in a way where it's like, what can you do like in this present moment to basically build up over time? And so I think staying in the present moment is a big way to eliminate some of that negativity I think that I put on myself, or like pressure that I put on myself. And then I think a lot of it too has to do with like social media and just media in general. I remember in high school we ended up reading a book that I forget what the title. I'm terrible at remembering titles, but like essentially the main point was that like the world is not as bad as you think it is. And I think when you open up New York Times or you open up any news article, you kind of look and it's like, well, war is kind of is happening. There's a bunch of countries that are fighting each other, and then it's also like stocks are down, and now like gas is super expensive, which is not great, especially like for Hawaii where your shipping costs are already high. But it's kind of, you see all of these negative things, and very rarely is there like kind of ever like a positive storyline. A lot of times it's negative, and basically what got explained was that it generates more clicks. It's kind of the concept of a rodeo, in a sense of you go to the rodeo or whatever to see like the big crash, or you go to NASCAR to see people crash, in a sense, or like the high flying, high adrenaline moments. You don't really go to see like, oh, this guy like won the race handedly. And that's kind of how I feel like media works sometimes, is a lot of like the shock factor, where you have a lot of people or like headlines where you kind of like look for clicks or look for like what's going to catch the most people's attention, and a lot of times it's kind of like whatever the most shock factor is, which is like, oh, this war that's going on, or um kind of all these like bad things that are happening in the world, and like that's what generates eyes. You want to like look for like the car accidents in the world rather than like, oh, this person did like this big charity event. And that's not to say that I think it's not worth covering, because for sure, especially like the war that's going on in the Middle East or between like Israel and Palestine, right? Like stuff like that does deserve to be covered, and like it's good to keep people informed. But also at the same time, it's like we should also, I guess, give gas to like good headlines, like good deeds that people do. So that way, when you go on like Reels or something, or you look at your news, it's not all just like, dang, it sucks. You know what I mean? Like, I think you get caught up in it too much about like trying to generate the most traffic for like a website or like your page, that like you miss the kind of good in the world, if that makes sense. And so I've been trying to like keep my Insta Reels positive by like using some of the algorithms, which has been kind of helpful. And being able to hear other people's stories about like what they struggled with and what helped them has kind of been really, really nice too. So I think in general, or I don't know if it's like really a summary, but like I feel like the world is a lot. It, there's a lot of things that are going wrong, of course, and I think I'm in a very lucky situation that my immediate kind of fish tank bubble is kind of doing all right, and I think my life is going a lot better than I think it is. It's just a lot of times when I like have a rough day or two consecutively, or like when I start to overthink things too much, that I kind of start to it kind of just starts down like a path or like a chain reaction of like day by day. It's just kind of like ne- you have too many negative days in a row, and then it's just kind of like, wow, like this sucks. But in reality, it's like a lot of things are going right. It's just that I'm focusing too much, I think, on the things that are going wrong. And so it's like for example, I guess like in the last couple of videos, I've been talking about like some talks that I've been having with my friends, and a lot of it has been like talking about like some things that I'm frustrated with or people that I'm frustrated with. And it's like when I focus too much on those things, I don't focus on like the good, which is actually like the friends who are willing to hear me out and spend some time to talk about things, or getting to hang out on the weekends, or even if it's like something as simple as just like playing D&D or something like that, right? Like taking like the small wins in life and like focusing on those rather than focusing so much on kind of things that go wrong. And I think, I guess a good way to think about it for me that I'm going to try and work on is like having better like goldfish memory, which is basically like when things that happen to me that I perceive as not great um happen, to like kind of just like not dwell on it and like keep focusing on it and trying to make it right, rather kind of just like let it go with the flow, like go with the flow and just kind of like let the moment pass and then keep going. Oh, this reminds me of like part of the story too. A big story was like I posted it on Instagram the other day, but basically it's hard to perceive what's good or bad just based on like, because a lot of people perceive what good or bad is based on the immediate kind of outfall of it. So like it's like that story of like the farmer where his like one of the examples was like the his son breaks his leg, and then his neighbor is like, wow, that sucks, your son broke his leg. But then it turns out that there's a war starting and that they're drafting people, and because the son broke his leg, he's not going to get drafted. And so the neighbor's like, oh wow, it's good. And basically the idea was like you can only tell like good or bad things that might, basically like the things that you may perceive as bad in the moment may end up being good later down the line. And so I'm trying to be better about that, in the sense of not just labeling something good or bad just based off of the immediate thing, but in the case of, let's say, like getting comments on my project work, like yes, it might feel really bad because you're like, wow, I missed like this really obvious thing, or I'm not good enough to do this. But I think in the long term, looking back, it's those sorts of fundamentals and things that I learned that I think will be really, really valuable. So yeah, just, I guess, try to be more positive about things. Don't focus too much on like whether things are good or bad in the immediate moment, and just kind of like stay in the present moment and just keep swimming, like Dory said, or like go with the flow, like Crash. Shout out Finding Nemo, great movie. But yeah, that's basically gonna be it, I think, for today. um just try to be more positive in life. Thanks for watching. Please, if you have some time, like, sub, do whatever you want. Have a great day for sure, though. Make sure you have a good day. But yeah, stay positive and thanks for watching.